How about what's going on at home? Homeland Security Secretary Tom Ridge concedes that some of the information that was acted upon does not prove to be as accurate as we thought it was. Worried that the heightened terror alert status flunked a lie detector test. Ridge told CNN, however, that the decision to move to the second highest alert level was not prompted by any one individual. Said even though some of the information does not seem as accurate, there's still enough there to remain at the orange level. Also says there's probably a lot more Al-Qaeda operatives in the U.S. than authorities are aware of, but he says has to be some evidence of involvement in terrorism before they can be picked up. Says the extra security that's been in place in New York City and in Washington is based on the view that terrorists tend to strike again where they've struck before. Well, you know what you got to do is you got to stop thinking with this Western way. That's one of our big problems. We think about things like this from the Western point of view, right? Well, it seems to us they're going to attack New York again, or I'd love to talk to somebody from the Coast Guard. How well protected is the lake? How well protected are many areas around the country? Coastlines, that sort of thing. My producer, Nate, you say you were in the Coast Guard. I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, sir.
How long were you in the Coast Guard?
For all 6 months.
Well, did you leave? I mean, don't you have to...
No, I was medically discharged.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's when my father proposed to my mother when he got out of the Army, and she woke up and she was lying in bed one night, and all of a sudden there was my father standing at the foot of the bed with his discharge in his hand. So 6 months and you were out.
Yes.
But I just wonder, because it was suggested to me that perhaps I speak to someone in the Coast Guard, and I thought, well, chances are, if they're on active duty, unless they're anonymous, they're not going to talk about it, right? It's a branch of the armed services.
Right.
And they're not supposed to be babbling and saying anything. You know, we made the national news. I believe it was yesterday. I believe it was NBC. And they spotlighted a little segment on Cleveland and how do we pay for all of this? The government is supposed to free up some cash, $30 million here and there, whatever. Well, the Homeland Security has not freed up the cash yet. So we can't just go about his business as usual. Then they showed a guy looking with binoculars out over the lake, and one guy with binoculars looking out over the lake. Looked like something out of Second City.
It's easy.
It's easy to be one guy looking out over the lake?
It would be totally easy for somebody to come in from a different country.
That's what I'm thinking. It'd be so simple to just float over here, especially with the upcoming boating season. And there's boats everywhere. What, are they going to stop everyone? Check everybody? But see, no, we think with the Western mentality. Well, here's the way terrorists usually... Terrorists, you have to think the unthinkable. That's how they think. They're not going to hit some obvious... Every schoolyard in America could be a target. How's that for scary? This is why I say, fine, if we want to go on with the war on terrorism, we need the government to lie to us in convincing fashion. And we need to know, now maybe President Bush is just a great poker player. Maybe, because it's a lot cheaper to move everyone into position to attack Iraq than to have Saddam sit there and go, maybe I should step down, or whatever. That's a lot cheaper than losing one American life, isn't it? It's a lot cheaper it's not cheap to move everybody into position, but once they're there, then Saddam has to sit there and seriously consider that there's an imminent threat to him. Maybe we'll get things changed without firing a shot. Probably not. Joe, you're on the air.
Hey, Gilly, how are you?
Great.
Hey, you're talking about security. Just think of the Olympics in Atlanta, Centennial Park. They had 5,000 private, federal, and public law enforcement officers there. And what happened? They still had an explosion there, and people died. But that's not what I was going to call about today. I just wanted to tell you, I was in Medina today because they had this ice sculpturing contest in the square. It was pretty neat. But I was talking to some people. They said, hey, there's a gun show going on at the fairgrounds right around the corner there in 42. And I was a little low on ammo, so I said, I think I'll take a ride over there. So I went to the show, and this is like 2:30, 2:45. I couldn't even find a spot there. That's how crowded. And I've been there several times before. And it was just like mayhem in there. It was 40 times worse than Y2K. People were carrying everything and anything out of that place. So I went. There's this little old lady from Columbus that I usually buy shells from, and I went there, and she was plumb out of everything there. So
only in America, and we sit around and talk about, well, I was a little low on shells, so I thought I'd stop over at the gun show. This is why I wonder why, if there's terrorists wandering around in this country, maybe they're thinking, gee, I ought to be looking over my shoulder here because I'm not sure who just might be packing heat.
Well, exactly. I don't know if we'll ever get a conceal and carry law here, but it wouldn't be relevant anyhow if something ever took place in the streets here. I mean, who would care? But the other question is, your survey, that's interesting. I never even noticed those papers were made in France. I never even looked at that.
I never paid any attention.
Me either.
I mean, you think about French products in this country. They used to sell Peugeots, which I called pig-outs because they were piles of crap, and Renaults before they got absorbed by American Motors, and Citroens, and they were junk too, and Simcas, and they were garbage. Yeah. And do the French make? I mean, I guess the French cooking's good if you like that sort of thing, but
those cars pretty much went extinct. I think they're like Mavericks. You don't see them anymore. Are you still there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just thinking about you mean like a Ford Maverick?
Yeah, you ever see one of those anymore?
Well, they just rotted out. Everything in the 70s.
What happened? Those Citroens and some of those cars are French built. You couldn't. They you don't know if they're coming at you or going away from you. I mean, just the style of them.
Well, they were kind of novel. I mean, the Citroen DS21 with the hydraulic system that controlled.
Oh, it used to raise up. That was cool.
Yeah, and that not only controlled the hydraulic springs, it also controlled the power steering and the automatic transmission and the brakes. I mean, it was one of those things where if you got a green fluid leak underneath the car, it's not only laying on the ground, you ain't going nowhere. So, I mean, a novel idea, but not the kind of thing you'd rely on.
So, back on your survey, I'm interested to see if there is any USA papers out there. And the other thing is, there's a commercial that runs quite frequent on your channel, Insight. And I'd like to hear some testimonies from people out there that tried it. I was thinking of maybe calling in and getting a sample of that stuff, but you know what? It'd be terrible to wake up in the morning and find out that you had Pinocchio Pecker.
Well, you'd pole vault out of bed and land on all fives.
Good night, Gilly.
Good night. Yeah, I don't know. Does that stuff work? Never tried anything like that myself. I'm saving up for a penis reduction. How about that? I loved what John McCain said. Everyone has a right to protest, but he wasn't real happy with the French. Says the Iraqi people be far, far better off when they're no longer under Saddam's thumb. He said Saddam has slaughtered his own people by the hundreds of thousands. Well, there's no loyalty there. It's a country that's put together. The British drew the borders years ago. Just bands of tribes of people, and Shiites and Sunnis and Kurds, and they all hate each other. They're not going to get along, are they? They'll never get along. Can't we just get along? No. Sometimes people just don't get along, and that's that. Hell, we don't get along in this country. We get along whenever there's an emergency or some sort of trouble. You ever notice that? 9/11, we're all brothers and sisters, we're all one color, we're all one family. And it only takes about 6 months, and everybody's bickering again. And you got Klan people or whoever popping up, or you got God knows what. Your triple Doppler forecast from TV3 forecaster Eileen McShay. Tonight, 1 to 3 inches of snow possible, low in the upper teens. Tomorrow, another 1 to 3 possible, high in the 20s. The further south you go, the more snow you're going to see. Winter weather advisory for Medina and Summit counties. 2 to 4 inches of snow tonight, 1 to 3 tomorrow. Currently 19 degrees with the wind chill. It feels like 7. That's got some light snow and some fog out there. Hopefully, maybe we'll dodge the bullet on this one. We seem to have a little bit. They're getting a lot more snow down south. Our cyber vote at WTAM.com. Are more arms inspections the answer? Well, log on and vote. 91% of you say no. That's not the answer. Well, what is the answer? There's a good question. Instead of just floating out the idea of what is the answer, I don't know. What is the answer? We don't hear a lot of solutions. Dennis Kucinich going to run for president. Does he have any solutions? Sure, you can sit there and list that litany of problems that we have. Everyone knows about that. But what's the answer, Dennis? Do you know? Maybe you can ask your wife and she'll quote it out for you. More of your phone calls after these important words on the big one.
Rick Gilmour.
I can tell where this is going, and you're an a-hole.
On News Radio WTAM 1100.
Well, maybe it's possible that gonorrhea only exists in Madonna. Might be like a petri dish. Go in there and get a pap smear. Half an hour later, you got a loaf of Italian twist.
It's raining men. Hallelujah, it's raining men. Amen.
One never knows. This is a great story from the New York Daily News. Principal of a troubled city school arraigned yesterday after cops caught her driving drunk and urinating on a Bronx street. Evelyn Peralta Testator, 41 of Public School 192 in Harlem, charged with driving while intoxicated and resisting arrest. They spotted Peralta Testator squatting and urinating beside the open door of her 2003 Mercedes-Benz on Tuesday. The car was stopped at a red light at 254th and Broadway. Peralta Testator admitted she'd been drinking. According to the complaint, she reeked of liquor and her speech was slurred. She refused to get out of the car and started flailing her arms at the officers. Her companion, School Secretary Helen Torres, then jumped out of the car and tried to keep officers from arresting the principal. She declined a breathalyzer test. She was arrested in 82 for marijuana, a violation. We've yet to find out if there are any American-made rolling papers. For the caller that wanted to know because he wanted to complete his boycott of the French. Apparently zigzags made in France. So anyway, this lady was urinating next to her 2003 Mercedes-Benz. Apparently, just because you got cash don't mean you got class. Unbelievable. I've seen it happen once, though. There was a woman drunk passed out in a friend of mine's car. She was out on a date. I walked out to make sure she was okay, and I realized by the time I woke her up that I was standing in a puddle. And I asked her where it came from, and she said it came from her. 2 letters, 1 word. Ew. Good thing I wasn't wearing sandals or something. Or bare feet. Oh, my goodness me. Don't even want to think about it. More of your phone calls after these important words and coverage of what in the world's happening on Cleveland's only news radio, WTAM 1100.
Rick Gilmour.
Media darling.
On News Radio WTAM 1100.
Dennis Kucinich, did you hear that report? Some people think that Dennis Kucinich can walk on water. Jesus Christ. Hope he has Bob Wiseman with him. He couldn't make any decisions when he was mayor without having Wiseman whisper in his ear, "Hey, Dennis, here's what you should say." Perhaps Bob Wiseman can walk on water. Maybe not Dennis. Liz, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Gilly. How you doing?
Great.
Yeah, I wanted to make a couple of comments about Dennis Kucinich. First of all, when he was mayor of Cleveland, I mean, he didn't do anything for the city of Cleveland.
He had some great ideas, like we should put snowplow blades on the front of fire trucks. That way, while they're while they're out on a run,
Dennis, they joke around, Dennis the Menace.
Yeah.
And a couple of experiences. I was at a debate. He was at Parma, And boy, did they have a lot of senior citizens there. And he just turned 50, and he was boasting about AARP. And I had a problem. I wanted to, touch base with him, and his representative said, "Oh, give me your name and number. He'll take care of it." Oh, they never took care of it. And I had another problem last year, and I called his office, and this woman answers the phone and said, "Oh, you don't have to worry about it." I says, "Oh, no, I want him to handle it." Nope, he never handled it. I had to go through a congressman. He touched base with Dennis. I never got a call from neither one of these people. And the way I look at it, these people that love Dennis Kucinich so much, they better wake up and smell the roses, because if he doesn't help the people here in Cleveland and the surrounding communities, what is he going to do for this United States as a president? I'm not going to vote for him.
I wouldn't vote for him on a bet.
Exactly.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dennis Kucinich for president. Well, let's put it this way. Well, he's a politician. I'll give him that. He's been a politician for a long, long time. I suppose anyone can throw their hat in the ring. I know people that want to run against him for Congress. Dennis will say anything you want to hear. He'll try and pump people up, but does he have a solution to any of the problems? Any of these jobs that went away that Dennis sat around and railed and said that we need to get them back? Any of these industries ever had everyone come back? Ever? Any of them? Any of them? Any one of them? Not to my knowledge. Rick, you're on the air.
Hey, how you doing, Gilly, tonight?
All right.
Staying warm?
Oh, yeah, nice and warm here in the studio.
Hey, good show. Couple things. Kucinich, he's a national joke. I mean, this guy, if you look up, he belongs to all these different caucuses with in the Congress, the Progressive Caucus. If you look at some of the people that are in that caucus, they're actual communists. I mean, some of them are tied to the Communist Party from out in Berkeley, a couple of the West Coast kookoids. And Kucinich is far, far lefter than most of his constituents even understand. And remember, when he was the mayor, he had us in default in about a year and a half, I think. The guy's he's out there just to throw up a bunch of gorilla dust and include the issues of the day. His comments and Sherrod Brown's comments on at the anti-war rally, I read the paper today, were despicable. This is not a time to be casting any aspersions and putting any doubts in our troops. They need our full support. I sent you a couple poems. Maybe you can read them. I emailed them to you just a few minutes ago. Possibly you can still catch them on the air in relevance to that fact. But I want to read you something real quick. This is Osama bin Laden's declaration of war, February 23rd, 1998. And this is where these people are coming from. And I think Iraq is the provider of the material, and Al-Qaeda is the bagman, so to speak. And we better get our act together and understand that we are in a war and stop all this nonsense and just get into it so we can get it done and over with. This is Osama bin Laden. With God's help, we call on every Muslim who believes in God and wishes to be rewarded to comply with God's order and kill Americans and plunder their money, divide their nation, tear them to shreds, destroy their economy, burn their companies, ruin their welfare, sink their ships, and kill them on land, sea, and air. May Allah torture them by your hands. In compliance with God's order, we issue the following to all Muslims. The ruling is to kill Americans and their allies, civilians and military alike. It is the individual duty of every Muslim who could do it in any country in which it is possible. End quote. Well, that's what we're up against, and we got people taking the initial stance. All of a sudden, it's got turned around that our government, George Bush, everybody, this is a war for oil, and we're the enemy. Our government's the enemy somehow. I don't understand how these people think.
Well, I think the radical ones believe that the idea that we're in a Muslim country at all is soiling that sacred land and that we should not be over there. And then they do not believe in our support for Israel. And I've asked on the air many times if someone out there is a Muslim, are they willing to give their life for Allah? And I've not gotten one response that said yes.
Well, I can understand their rabid viewpoint. I just can't understand the viewpoint. My question was to you was, basically, how can Americans blame our government? This whole thing's got turned around where you got millions of people in the streets that we're the bad guy. We're out to occupy the world. We had their oil fields. We had the oil fields in Iraq, and we had them in Kuwait. Did we sit there and sit on them and keep them if this is a war for oil? We gave them back. We left.
I think people have the right to question, but I think when they're protesting in the streets, that's a slap in the face to the troops. Because if they see that on TV while they're sitting over there in Iraq, they're thinking, well, what the hell's this?
Right. It doesn't do any good for the morale. Plus, these people, I watched that whole last protest, and I watched part of this one, and there's always this ulterior motive second agenda that's going on. People glom onto this thing with every cause and conviction that they have that's superficial to the issue, just to get some notoriety and camaraderie and cohesion with it so they can get noticed. What's, Free Mahmoud or whatever his name is, Jabad.
Mumia?
Killed the cop.
Mumia Jama.
What's that got to do with the war on Iraq? It's in the war, and then it says, and end racism. What's racism got to do with the war on Iraq?
Well, I think there are people that will glom onto the causes and say, well, the Iraqis are an oppressed people, and so is Mumia. However, there was an eyeball witness that said he saw Mumia shoot a cop.
Right, exactly. And this is the Dennis Kuciniches of the world and his ilk, and the Sherrod Browns and the leftists of the world, the liberals of the world that bring us, no prayer in schools because we're going to form a state religion. They go with all these hypotheses that haven't ever been brought to fruition. It's the nth degree they take things to with their argument. The Pledge of Allegiance of the flag because one little, Muslim kid or Jewish kid doesn't want to acknowledge Christianity. Well, you know what? They're not saying to acknowledge Christianity. They're just saying to acknowledge God. Whatever you want to, if you're a Druid and worship a tree, you can think of it in that way. But, it's just, they take the thing to just the nth degree, and it's just goofy.
Rick, I gotta move. I'll check that email out in a break. If I don't read it tonight, I'll read it another night. Yeah, I have curious thoughts on what's going on. I voted for George Bush, and then if I question why we're going over there or why we're not lied to in more sufficient fashion, people call up and, how dare you? Well, perhaps there's a method to my madness. Look at the people out there that are protesting. You're not going to find me protesting in the streets. Is it because I'm not passionate enough to I don't need to protest in the streets. I don't need to be one person out of 150,000 wandering down some street in New York City. I can sit here and tell you how I feel. Did I ever say that I had a problem with the government lying to us in convincing fashion? No, I just said I think the government should be lying to us in more convincing fashion. I didn't say I had a problem with it. These people don't like us. There's people around the world, they just don't like us. And what are we going to do about it? Well, we need to galvanize the American public. We need to make sure that there's support. Now, I've always thought the government fibs to you, and there's certain things you just don't need to know. You're not privy to all the information. Most people are dumb. Do you tell dumb people things that you don't want them to just go blab? People that tell me things, and they say, this is like an AA meeting or something. Don't say this, or don't say that on the air. Guess what? Well, if I went and blabbed it, they'd never tell me anything else. It becomes a matter of trust. And I suppose, like faith in God, sometimes you have to trust the government and wonder whether they're doing the right thing or not. But I just think that of all the campaigns that the government has put forth, the notion that we need to go to war, they seem to be slacking off. The Republican War Party, if that's what they are, well then by God, get everybody behind us. Shouldn't be 150,000 people protesting in the streets of San Francisco. Lie to us in more convincing fashion. Tom, you're on the air.
Hey, Rick, how are you doing?
All right.
I was listening to you yesterday talk about George Bush and how...
No, wait a minute. That was Rick Abel.
That was Rick Abel?
Yeah. Afternoon? In the afternoon?
No, it was you. You were saying you're not convinced by him. He doesn't seem very convincing.
I was not on yesterday. I was out of town.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right. But, hey, whoop. Well, hey, hang it in my ear, will you? Rick Gilmour, Rick Abel. Rick Gilmour, Rick Abel. Oh, you're on the big one.
Hey, Rick, how you doing?
All right.
Hey, listen, I just want to tell you that I was at the protest in downtown Cleveland yesterday. We met at Trinity Cathedral. We marched down Euclid Avenue. We met up over there. We met at the Federal Building. And I'm going to tell you that there were people there from all walks of life, passionate people, young, old, everybody in between. And you know something? I am so proud to be part of a new consciousness, and the consciousness that is trying to be perpetrated on in this country, around this world, by these reptilian Bush people, is basically their way out of step. And I got to tell you something. I give the Germans, I give the French, I give those people. I am just so proud of them, and I am so proud of the United Nations, and I hear a lot about relevancy. And quite frankly, the ones that are being really irrelevant in this world today, with the elevated consciousness of millions of people marching and sharing their voices for a new world, a new peace, the ones that are really irrelevant is the Death Star United States. Okay, they are.
You're an American citizen, right?
Absolutely.
There's plenty of room in France and Germany. I know I question, I ask. Prove to us that we need to go to war. Prove it to me. Show me proof. I don't care if you lie to me. Give us some viable proof and tell us there's a direct connection. You can prove it. You can do this. You can do that. And putting our troops in harm's way to go fight in Iraq is going to do something to stop terrorism in this country. Don't be a panty waste. Don't beat around the bush, Bush. Come out and lie to us in convincing fashion and tell us this is why we need to go to war, and that's that. You wouldn't have protesters in the streets, or if you would, go turn a fire hose on them or something. There's people around the world that don't like us. They don't like us. They hate our guts. I've said this for weeks now. Just lie to us a little better. That's all I want. Hell, if I lived to be 90 years old and had $10 million and some 19-year-old said to me, I love you, baby. You're the greatest. I don't want your money. I love you. I'd think, well, how long am I going to last anyway? And I'd like to go at 95 on the downstroke. She can have my damn money. But don't come up and say, oh, I want your money. Just lie to us in convincing fashion, damn it. It worked for Richard Nixon, didn't it? You want to be a good Republican, you have to learn to fib a little better. Triple Doppler forecast from TV3 forecaster Eileen McShade tonight. 1 to 3 inches of snow is possible. Upper teens for a low tomorrow. Another 1 to 3 possible, high in the 20s. The farther south you go, the more snow you'll get. Winter weather advisory from Medina and Summit counties. 2 to 4 inches of snow overnight with another 1 to 3 tomorrow. Don't need no insight down there now, do ya? Do the math. Currently 19 degrees with a wind chill. It feels like 7 right here in Cleveland, Ohio. Ohio. Is that how they'd say it in Ireland? Ohio. Maybe they'd say OH10. After the top of the hour news, you'll get the Drudge Report. Check that out right here on Cleveland's only news radio, WTAM 1100.
Rick Gilmour.
You get your funky off. I get my funky off. Every red-blooded American gets his funky off.
On News Radio WTAM 1100.
Well, perhaps I should read for you again an email that I got at Gilly@WTAM.com. And thanks for calling, and thanks for listening, and all that. And thanks to Ed and Nate for pulling the strings and pushing the buttons and dials and keeping the program on track. Perhaps I should read this to you again. As we move precariously towards war, I want you to consider that there are people around the world that really do not like us. They don't like us. Why? Perhaps this will help you glean some information as to why they dislike Americans so much. My friend Rick DeMarco sent this. Called "And They Don't Like Us." If you're interested in the ramblings of an old man, please leave now. If you're still there, pull up a chair and listen. Is there anyone else out there who's sick and tired of all the polls being taken in foreign countries as to whether or not they like us? The last time I looked, the word "like" had nothing to do with foreign policy. I prefer respect or fear. They worked for Rome, which civilized and kept the peace in the known world for a hell of a lot longer than our puny 2 centuries plus. I see a left-wing German got elected to office recently by campaigning against the foreign policy of the United States. Yeah, that's what I want, to be lectured about war and being a good neighbor by a German. Their head honcho said they wouldn't take part in a war against Iraq. Kind of nice to see them taking a pass on a war once in a while. Perhaps we needed to have the word world in front of war. I think it's time to bring our boys home from Germany. Outside of the money we'd save, we'd make the Germans like us a lot more after they started paying the bills for their own defense. Last time I checked, France isn't too fond of us either. They sort of liked us back on June 6, 1944, though, didn't they? If you don't think so, see how nicely they take care of the enormous American cemeteries up above the Normandy beaches. For those of you who've studied history, we also have a few cemeteries in places like Belleau Woods and Chateau Thierry also. For those of you who have not studied it, that was from World War I, the first time Europe screwed up and we bailed out the French. That's where the U.S. Marines got the title Devil Dogs, or, if you still care about what the Germans think, Teufelshunde. I think I spelled that right. Sure wouldn't want to offend anyone, least of all a German. Come to think of it, when Europe couldn't take care of their Bosnian problem recently, guess who had to help them out? Last time I checked, our kids are still there. I sort of remember they said they'd be out in a year. Gee, how time flies when you're having fun. Now we hear the South Koreans aren't too happy with us either. They liked us a lot better, of course, in June of 1950. It took more than 50,000 Americans killed in Korea to help give them the lifestyle they currently enjoy, but then who's counting? I think it's also time to bring the boys home from there. There are about 37,000 young Americans on the DMZ, separating the South Koreans from their brothers up north. Maybe if we leave, they can begin to participate in the good life that North Korea currently enjoys. Sure. I also understand that a good portion of the Arab Muslim world now doesn't like us either. Did anyone ever sit down and determine what we would have to do to get them to like us? Ask them what they would like us to do. Die? Commit ritual suicide? Bend over? Maybe we should follow the advice of our dim-witted, dullest knife in the drawer, Senator Patty Murray, and build more roads, hospitals, daycare centers, and orphanages like Osama bin Laden does. What with all the orphans Osama has created, the least he can do is build some places to put them. Senator Stupid says that if we would only emulate Osama, the Arab world would love us. Sorry, Patty, in addition to the fact that we already do all those things around the world and have been doing them for over 60 years. I don't take public transportation, and I certainly wouldn't take it with a bomb strapped to the guy next to me. Don't get me wrong, I'm not in favor of going to war. Been there, done that. Several times, in fact. But I think we ought to have some polls in this country about other countries. See if we like them. Problem is, if you listed the countries, not only wouldn't the average American know if he liked them or not, he probably wouldn't be able to find them. If you're supposed to worry about them, well, how about them worrying about us once in a while? We were nice to the Koreans, the North Koreans, in 1994, as we followed the policies of Neville Clinton, and it seemed to work. They did not restart nuclear weapons programs for a whole year or so. In the meanwhile, we fed them when they were starving, put oil in their stoves when they were freezing. In a recent visit to Norway, I engaged in a really fun debate with my cousin's son, a student at a Norwegian university. I was lectured by this thankless squirt about the American empire and scolded about dropping the atomic bomb on the Japanese. I reminded him that empires usually keep the stuff they take. We don't. And back in 1945, most Norwegians thought dropping any kind of bomb on Germany or Japan was a good idea. I also reminded him that my uncle, his grandfather, and others in our family spent a significant time in Sachsenhausen concentration camp, courtesy of the Germans, and they did not all survive. I further reminded him that if it wasn't for the American Empire, he would probably be speaking German or Russian. Sorry about all the rambling, but I just took an unofficial poll here at our house, and we don't seem to like anyone.
The Big One presents